I am going to take us on a little bit of a journey, and essentially I'll talk a little bit about botany, but I'm not going to delve that much into botany, and I'm also not really going to spend too much on the science that I actually do in the Natural Sciences building. There are some people that have seen me talk before here. I see Keanu. Some people have actually been in my class. And so if you want to learn more about the science that I actually do, then perhaps you can catch that inaugural that Marina was talking about. But there are also some other opportunities on YouTube, on public lectures that I've actually given. So I'm going to talk more about these opportunities of actually linking science and society. And that's what I think is quite exciting about where we are at the moment in South Africa in relation to science communication. So I studied at the University of Natal way back when a long while ago. 2004 was when I finished my PhD. And in all honesty, in our lab, the motto was publish or perish. And so when I stepped out of the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Pietermaritzburg and I arrived at Stellenbosch, and I was the only person that looked like me doing science, a black female in the Faculty of Science at the time. Henny was actually part of our staff during then. It actually made me really aware that we needed to make the science much more accessible to people that look like me, a short black woman. And one of the reasons I actually studied plants particularly is because my father was a botanist, and I often think that if I didn't have the opportunity of growing up directly linked to somebody that was an academic at the University of Fort Hare at the time that was doing botany, and if I didn't have a great bio teacher, I probably would have been a something else, and I would not have been standing here today. And so I think being able to be visible is very important in South Africa as a scientist, particularly in my position, because it hopefully allows to inspire other people who have not had the same opportunities as me. And so if we just take a look here, we've kind of moved from the public understanding of science, which is more of a, let's fill the Ellenmeyer flask, to more in relation to the public engagement. We actually need to be able to engage the public. And this, I think, was exceedingly important, particularly in relation to COVID. And so people need to be aware of what is actually happening in our labs. And as Rick already said, it does build better trust, and you can have better conversations and discussions. And I think this is exceedingly important. It gives the public an opportunity to be able to interrogate questions and put forward their concerns, and for the scientists also to be able to involve themselves in those conversations. And so I think it's very important that there has been this particular move. So now I have a question for everybody in the room. What are we seeing in this picture? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? I like trees, but some people said lions, right? And most people would generally say the animals. Most people actually don't see plants. And hence, there is this term which is known as plant blindness. And now we have actually evolved as botanists and other people that are into plants, and we have decided to regard this as plant awareness disparity. But most people really do not see plants. And what I think is crazy, I teach first-year biology, and I've even got sports scientists amongst the core group, and they don't understand why they need to do plant biology. And I keep asking them in my class, how do you think the sportsman is going to be able to run the race if they don't have oxygen? And I think suddenly it becomes aware to them that plants are actually an integral part of our lives. And this is also one of the reasons that I actually spend a lot of time communicating about plants. And so you can read this nice little article here that's actually written about plant blindness and how it actually impacts ideas around conservation of different flora. And I think it's a very interesting article that you can find at Q. And so we have this problem. We have plant blindness or plant awareness disparity. And really, most people in society are not seeing plants at all. Most people have very little knowledge about plants. And if you're a botanist, the one thing that they think that you're going to be able to do is to be able to name all of the plants. And I think, of course, that's problematic because I only work on a very small group of plants and I don't have all knowledge about all plants. And there's generally quite a bad attitude in society in relation to plants, despite plants being so important in our day-to-day lives. I can't live without coffee, and of course, that comes from plants. And so many of us that work with plants are aware that there is this lack of appreciation of plants, and it has even led to a YouTube channel by Dr. Chris Martin in the US, and that's called Plants Are Cool. And there are many other interventions that are related to making plants sexy. And in South Africa, we've got the sexiest plants, I think, in the whole entire world, because we've got an incredible floral diversity. And we happen to be one of the mega biodiversity spots in the world. And we sit in a very unique part of the world where we've got this incredible flora, a concentration of plant species. Many of them are not found anywhere else in the world except for here. And tons of plants and tons of this plant diversity, and in a non-tropical area. And that, I think, is exceedingly special. And particularly in the Western Cape, we sit in the Cape floristic region with 9,000 species or so. And where I come from, the Maputo-Ponderland Albany corridor, that's in the Eastern Cape somewhere, and moving along towards the top ends of our country, you find about 1,900 plant endemics. So this flora is really incredible. And I love to share it with other people. And quite honestly, I work with medicinal plants, and some of these plants are very interesting, such as the wild African ginger, which has actually gone extinct from over-harvesting. And this particular species here has had a name change. It was called Erythrina caffra, which was not politically correct in relation to the South African context. And to fix that, at the International Botany Congress, they decided to drop the C or the K and just call it Erythrina afra. And I think it's a wonderful shout out to the plants of Africa. And of course, other species like the Aleodendron dichotomum or the quiver trees that are found in places like Namakwaland are really quite amazing. And they're now being used as a means to study climate change. And this species right here, the Velvicias, very slow growing, found in places like Namibia and other parts of Namakwaland, are really quite majestic and very, very interesting. So this flora is really quite spectacular and really quite wonderful. And now I'm going to play a little video to show you what these plants really look like. And they are very beautiful. They are found in many different parts of South Africa. They're very different in the way that they look. They're found in all kinds of geographic environments. They're well adapted to their environments. And sometimes when you go out there, you have an explosion of this flora. And for me, it is so exciting because the science that I do, the basic science, discovery science that I do, actually takes me out into the field so that I can actually interact with these plants in many different forms. And this flora has fascinated other people, other natural historians, for many, many, many years. And this dates back right to the times of the Dutch East India Company. And so it continues to be very fascinating for botanists in South Africa. And I think it's exceedingly important that young people are aware of this flora, as well as other sciences in South Africa, because this is one way in which to build a nation. And yes, I communicate much about the work that I do at Stellenbosch University, but I'm also interested in other aspects in relation to how science actually plays in our society. So one of the methods of my communication is actually to write articles for the conversation, for example. And this particular article has done many rounds. It started here in the conversation in Africa, and somewhere along the line, we were celebrating women in science, and suddenly I saw it pop up in the conversation in other parts of the world. And so one of the reasons for this, trying to inspire other people, particularly South Africans who don't necessarily have access to the same opportunities as me. As I indicated, we started a new social impact program in our department called Lithops, which allows us to be able to go into schools here in Stellenbosch and even in Somerset West, and particularly in the townships where we know that access to laboratory environments is not necessarily that easy. And so this was during Plant Day this year, and you see these learners here actually building a homemade microscope, and one of my colleagues, Itumeleng Murinyane, was involved in actually organizing these microscopes through the New Phytologist Foundation. And I think being able to go into environments where access to science, basic science, through to applied sciences is exceedingly important, because there are many conversations that need to be held at the school level. And I bring this up, and the reason I bring this up is because Marina was actually involved in this paper, and I think this was done amongst a community of students on our campus. And they were asked to draw a scientist, and I don't know, but when I take a closer look at those gentlemen, they don't look anything like me. And this is not so long ago. So that, for me, I think is quite worrying, because the perception of what a scientist is still a white male. Somebody that probably looks like Einstein, and I don't look anything like Einstein. And so I have actually been quite excited to see the evolution in incentives that are trying to bring to fore and make more visible scientists, young scientists, emerging scientists, South African scientists, that are now regarded as superheroes. So I think this is a wonderful initiative which is actually making the visibility of science in general in South Africa more accessible to people throughout different parts of the country. And now I want to talk a little bit about this particular sketch here, which integrates science communication to policymakers, to journalists, society, science news, and institutions. And often, in our particular environment, we spend more time actually with peer-to-peer science communication. And I think it's actually exceedingly important to delve out of there and actually start to integrate a little bit more with that particular network. And I'm very glad to see some of my colleagues from the maths department that are actually at this particular conference. So what kind of work do I do? I'm more interested in the biocultural interaction that's associated with plant diversity and biochemistry because it can lead to economic goods. And that actually brings me to communicating my science to people that are at the grassroots level in relation to traditional medicines and medicinal plants. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to play this, but I think this is a lovely documentary that we can actually access, and it gives some reasons why South Africans are still so interlinked to indigenous knowledge and traditional medicines. So that would be a wonderful documentary to go and see. And to start to wind up this particular talk, I want to talk a little bit more about the science that I actually have been doing. I've been working on plants like Sciletium tortuosum. This is called kana or gochut, chugud, and some people just refer to this as Sciletium. And it's a medicinal plant that is a succulent, and people chew on this particular plant, and then it gives them a good sense of euphoria. And normally I would have some samples because at this time people are starting to lose concentration, and so it's usually a good idea to actually to chew on a little bit of this. I think I am going to play this particular video. I'm not sure if we can hear it. It's fine. We have the subtitles going there. And this was an interview that we had with Tina Panas, and she was telling us about how she actually uses Sciletium. And this was a really interesting conversation because both my student and I that were there are not necessarily the best at Afrikaans, but we've actually had to learn to be able to communicate a little bit of our science in a language that's not necessarily our first language. And Tina, even though I was asking the questions, she was still able to give some really deep information about her practice in relation how she actually uses Sciletium. And so this information for me is the basis of the work that I actually do on campus. It is very helpful. She took us out into the field, and ultimately she managed to show us where the plants were, and this was one of the sets of plants that we actually studied with this very complex looking approach where we use metabolomics, and what that is really just trying to study all of the plant metabolites within an extract. And then we used molecular docking, where we literally dump these chemicals onto a computational receptor. And then this actually allowed us ultimately to be able to pick out a very interesting chemotype, which has actually now gone into a commercial space. And this product, Clock Out, is out for sale. On Thursday, I'll be going to the SAN Council to finalize the signing of the benefit sharing agreement, and thereafter we will be able to sell this product. And the sophisticated science that we've been doing in my particular environment, I think has actually been exceedingly helpful. And some of the science I actually share via different social media platforms, and this actually included being a founding member of the Black Botanist Week. This is the only graph I decided to show this afternoon, or this morning. And this was a summary of our first week as Black botanists throughout the whole entire world. Again, trying to inculcate a love of plants through society and making different people that are active in botany more visible. And what I think was really quite interesting is that the age group that was engaging with us really quite deeply is indicated by that green bar. And those were the people amongst the ages of 25 and 34. And so this platform actually allowed us to be able to communicate much of the basic science that we do in our labs, in our different labs, and actually bring it towards a global visibility. And that has been really quite instrumental for me in many ways. It has made me interact with many other scientists. It has allowed me to set up new collaborations. And so not only, I think, has it been effective as a tool for science communication, but it has also been very effective in actually driving my particular career. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference.